Om Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyau Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantif Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantif Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantif Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet, Sarvastaratu Durgani, Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu, Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu, Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we start today on verse 7 of chapter 4. Let's chant together. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutthanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Whenever, O descendant of Bharata, righteousness declines and unrighteousness prevails, I manifest myself. So this is one of the very famous verses of the Gita, which is quoted very often. If we see the context, you remember Krishna tells Arjuna earlier in this chapter that I gave this teaching long back, and he mentions all these ancient names. And then Arjuna says, you were not even born then. Arjuna and Krishna more or less same age. How come you were able to give this teaching? And then if you see the earlier verse to this, verse 6, Krishna says, though I am birthless, immutable, and the Lord of creatures, yet resorting to my Prakriti, I come into being through my own inscrutable power. So Krishna says, first of all, he says, I have come many times before. I remember all my births, you don't. And then Krishna points out that I am birthless, immutable, and the Lord of creatures, and yet I come into being. Now, coming into being means taking birth. Now, there is clearly a contradiction here. How come someone who is birthless takes birth? And taking birth and coming into being is possible only when there is change. Clearly, when any living organism begins its life, it's just a single cell. So there is continual change, there is growth, there is transformation. So not only is the divine being birthless, but also immutable. No change is possible. So someone who is birthless, someone who is changeless, someone who is the Lord of creatures, how does such a person become a part of creation? How does such a person take birth? So something impossible, logically speaking, is occurring here. And that is why he says, Prakritim swam adhisthaya sambhavami atma mayaya. Only through my own inscrutable power of Maya, it becomes possible. Maya is sometimes described in Vedanta as that power which makes the impossible possible. What do you think? What does it mean for something impossible becoming possible? Is it possible for someone who is birthless to take birth? What do you think?
They're describing themselves, the Lord is describing himself as birthless because his being never ceases to be. But he's taking birth, he's coming, he is taking on a human form. And so so in that way he's taking birth.
Right, but then isn't there a contradiction? So if she's taking birth, then he's not birthless.
Well, but his being never ceases to be, whether he's in the form of a body or not.
Say that again?
Whether the Lord is taking human form or not, manifested or unmanifested, he doesn't cease to be, so he's birthless. But he's taking birth in the way we think of it.
So that means he's not really taking birth.
Right, he's just taking a human form for a purpose.
But not really taking birth, right? Because then it won't be birthless. So he's appearing to take birth. He is appearing to take a human form. That way, appearances, anything is possible. It's like right now, in 1 minute, we cannot really be present in Hawaii. Really not possible. But let's say I fall asleep, and in a moment, in my dream, I can be in Hawaii. So I am in Hawaii, and yet not in Hawaii. I'm not really there, and yet, as long as I'm dreaming, I'm pretty much there, right? So it's a very strange state of being. It is there and it is not there at the same time. And that is why it says that it happens due to Maya. So Maya is a power which seems to make the impossible possible. And the key term here is seems to make. A rope can never become a snake. Impossible. But a rope can appear to be a snake. And appearances, yes, it's completely possible. But really, no. Something like that may be happening here. We don't know yet. We don't have to come to any conclusion right now. But just to be logically consistent, that if the divine is birthless, then the divine cannot really take birth. But nothing stops the divine from appearing to take birth. That's the idea. So then the obvious question would be, even if it is an appearance, when does such an appearance occur? When does it happen? Is there any reason it happens? Is there any purpose it happens? And that's what is described in the verse that we just chanted. So whenever dharma declines and adharma increases, I manifest myself. Now, dharma and adharma are terms which come very often in the texts, and there's a lot that can be said about dharma. One of our Swamis, very senior Swamis, name is Swami Tyagananda ji. He was the head of our Bangalore ashrama way back in the 30s and 40s. And he was a very profound scholar. So he started giving a class on the Gita, and Gita, as we are studying now, the very first verse of the Gita, begins with Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha. So begin with dharma, the word dharma. The very first word in the Gita is dharma. And so when this Swamiji was explaining the term dharma, that explanation lasted for 6 months. So you are lucky that we are going at a pretty brisk pace. So there is, in other words, there is a lot that can be said. It's enough for our purpose to know that dharma is a very comprehensive term which includes everything that is right, everything that is good. It can be used to refer to our duty, to justice, to truth. Dharma is a very, very broad term. But in general, everything that we see as good, everything that we see as right, can be classified under dharma. And it's the opposite of it is adharma. So dharma and adharma. And what Krishna is saying here, is that when dharma declines and adharma increases, I come into being. And we see that happening. This is a very natural phenomenon that we see occurring at different levels, at different even in your workplace or in an organization or in a corporation, when a new or a business or a school, wherever, in the beginning everything seems to be very perfect, ideal. And then over time, things tend to become disorganized. Over time, things seem to get diluted. Sometimes we might see that in our own lives. Think about the time when you were first excited about spiritual life, your first entry into spiritual life, or the day you were received initiation, the day you began meditation. In the beginning, there is so much enthusiasm, energy, curiosity, hopefulness, which is good. Now the challenge is to maintain that level of hope, that level of energy, that level of inspiration all through. Because if that is not done, then over time, that initial enthusiasm kind of then slowly gets declined. And then the daily meditation becomes just one more chore to be completed. Now that shouldn't happen. And sometimes, therefore, the different festivals that we have, the different days of celebration that we have, religious celebration I mean, are opportunities then to kind of renew ourselves, to look at our own life and see whether my initial enthusiasm, has it gotten diluted somewhat? And I need to then reinvigorate myself. I need to renew myself. And that's what happens in the world also. So we see that there are, if you look at the history of the world, or history of your community, or history of wherever, there are moments when this is wonderful, everything is great, and then things go downhill a little bit. And then again they go up, and again they go downhill. So this is how things are. It happens in terms of our physical health. It happens oftentimes in terms of the state of our mind, and so on. Same thing happens with regard to the world also. So in the world in which we live, there is good and bad. No one can deny that. There are things which are right and there are things which are wrong. There are things which are wonderful, there are things which are terrible. That's how the world is. More or less, if the equilibrium is more or less maintained, then the world kind of goes on okay. But let's say at some point, because of this gradual decline that occurs in history, this evil or the wickedness or the adharma becomes in a lot and the goodness becomes less, then someone has to come to restore the balance. Something has to be done. And what we see is that periodically, if we just look back at history, we see that some extraordinary souls have come down at different points in history who have injected such power into human consciousness that balance seemed to kind of get restored a little bit. That doesn't mean that everyone becomes good. Well, no, it never becomes that way. There will still be rogues around everywhere. But the balance will more or less be maintained. So it is this periodic appearance of a great soul in history, in different parts of the world, that is what gets recognized as a descent of the divine. That these people manifest such extraordinary qualities that we often identify with divine life, that sometimes it is not so easy to find out whether is this a human being who has raised himself or herself to that high level and almost become divine, or it's a divine being who has now come and is appearing as a human being. So it's a meeting point of the human and divine. And that's why it's sometimes called, when you look upon it as a descent of the divine, then we call it avatar. In literally speaking, in Sanskrit, the word avatar means coming down, the one who comes down. So it is a movement from the divine to the human. And then when people become enlightened, we say it is a movement from the human to the divine. So here Krishna points out that when dharma declines, adharma increases, I take birth. And then he says, what does he do after taking birth? That he describes in the next verse, verse 8. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. For the protection of the righteous and the destruction of the wicked, and for the establishment of religion, I come into being from age to age. This is what I meant by saying periodical descent, from age to age. So it's not a one-time event. For the protection of the good, for the destruction of the wicked. A question that can come is, why would God destroy? Although the God's concept varies from tradition to tradition, and pretty much in most forms there is some way God does a lot of destruction. And then the question is, it doesn't sit well thinking about God as destroying something or punishing someone. That's good for seeing God as a tyrant, a judge who is meting out. Even if God is meting out justice, still, it somehow doesn't feel good. God is destroying, because the idea is that, well, if someone is doing adharma, why was God allowing them to do adharma in the first place and then punishing them? Just don't allow them and just kind of nip their adharma in the bud rather than punishing them later on. And that is why in the commentary you will see, Sridhara's commentary in this thing, he says that when a mother punishes the child, that's not an act of cruelty. That's in fact an act of love. That's out of love it is done. So God, as a regulator of the good and bad in the universe, is not doing it as a matter of cruelty, but in fact out of love for the entire creation. Another one important term here is dharma samsthapana, which is the establishment of religion. Now, this is important to reflect a little bit, that when an avatar comes down, dharma is established. So what does it mean, dharma is established? I said that clearly, it doesn't mean that everyone becomes good. If all people become good, then this world will not be the world that it is. And it's never happened that way. In fact, we read in the Bhagavata, Krishna. So there are these 4 yugas mentioned in the texts. There is the golden age called the Satya Yuga. And then when there is a slight decline in that level of dharma, then the next age came called Treta Yuga. I must drink some water now. I don't know. The next age was Treta Yuga. So that's a little bit lower than the Satya Yuga. And we know that Rama, the story of Ramayana, occurred in Treta Yuga. When the dharma went as one notch lower, then came Dwapara Yuga. That was when Krishna was born. And then when it went still lower, that's called the Kali Yuga. That's where we have come. Now, sometime in mythology, they depict this yuga as a cow, in the form of a cow. And the idea is that in the Satya Yuga, the cow was standing on all of her four legs. Then Treta Yuga, one leg got chopped off. She was just standing on three legs. Then Dwapara, she somehow managed to balance on two legs. Just imagine, right now, it's just one leg. So this is how it is described in the texts. Now, Krishna, who was born in Dwapara Yuga, he was an avatar. He came to establish religion. And we read in the Bhagavata, as soon as Krishna died, Kali Yuga started. Now, one would have expected that, well, an avatara has come, there should be an upward swing. How come then it goes further down? So clearly, this establishment of dharma does not mean that suddenly everybody becomes good. Actually, come to think of it, it seems like a great idea. Everybody becomes good. But honestly, if everyone is good, the world will be quite a boring place. Really, what really makes the world as it is, terrible as things are, that there is this enormous diversity and variety. There was a viewpoint, I think in Germany or in some European thinkers, was that good is an continually increasing quantity, and evil, if we try to eradicate evil from the world, it can go on reducing. So two were very independent existences. And so the idea was, keep on doing good and destroy all evil. So a day will come when only the good will remain. So there were people who believed that something like this would happen. And there are people even today who believe something like this will happen. The Vedantic view is that the world as we know it, the world as we understand it, will always remain a mixture of good and evil, good and bad. So the world, that's the nature of the world. And if it's the nature of the world, the nature cannot change. The example that Swami Vivekananda often gives in his Karma Yoga talks is of a dog's tail. If a dog's curly tail, no matter how much you straighten it, it's going to curl up again. Then we might say, well, then what's the point? If the world is going to remain as just this place of mixed good and bad, then why should I be good? Why should I be good? Why should I follow dharma if this world will always remain a mixture of dharma and adharma? And the idea is this: if I do what is right and what is good, then I reap good results. That is all karma and karma phala. Good karma will lead to good results. But because the karma that I do is limited, really, I mean, in a lifespan, how much good can you do? You can do a lot of good, but it will be still limited. And because it's limited, the good results that I experience will also be limited. Just as, no matter how much bad I do, it's still limited. So I will suffer for it, but that suffering also will be limited. But if I do now good in the spirit of yoga, in the spirit of karma yoga, without expecting anything in return, I do it as a free will offering. I do good with no self-interest involved. If I do that, then I become purified. The change that occurs in me is permanent. So the world will not change. The world will continue as it is. But I can get out of this whole mess. So that's the idea. And so therefore, when an avatar comes to establish dharma, it is not to be understood in the sense that everyone becomes good. What it does mean is that when these extraordinary beings come periodically, and establishing dharma means they inject a power into this world which makes it possible for those few who are sincerely striving to live according to dharma, possible for them to do so. You see, it's not always the balance of the world is not determined in terms of numbers. By that I mean, it doesn't have to be that 50% of the world's population, I mean, the universe is much too bigger. That's way beyond our even comprehension. Let's just think about a little planet Earth of ours. And let's focus only on human beings, although all living beings also have the same jiva. So it's a pretty small focus group we are dealing with. So even to maintain that balance of good and evil in the world, it's not necessary that 50% of the people are good and 50% are bad. It's never like that. It's not in terms of numbers, it's in terms of the intensity of good. And that's why even a handful of people who are completely holding on to the path of dharma, leading according to dharma, can balance even billions of people who may not be able to hold on to dharma with completely. And that is why in every generation there will always be a few enlightened beings in the world. The number will be small, but it is these few enlightened beings in the world in every generation which are able to balance out the non-spiritual elements of the rest of the universe. So that's good to remember. It's not a matter of numbers. And one more thing. Establishment of dharma can also be understood in terms of the avatar leaving behind a body of teaching and a body of form. That's why the avatar takes form. That form and then the teaching that they give benefits not only their contemporaries, but for generations together, for centuries together. So it's the same divine who has come down periodically, whether in the form of Jesus or Moses or Buddha or Ramakrishna or Guru Nanak, all of these great people, that it's not like these are different people come at different times. According to the Gita's insight, we see the same divine power which periodically descended at different places, at different points, and injected spiritual power to restore the imbalance between good and bad, and became the source of a tradition which continues to nourish people everywhere. So it's the teaching and the form and the personality of the Buddha, of Christ, of Prophet Muhammad, of Ramakrishna, and all these great ones, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they have continued to inspire and guide people to this day. So that's the way dharma gets established. It's not in terms of numbers, it's not in terms of everyone becoming good. So this is important to remember. So these verse 7 and 8 are very important. Those of you who have seen the TV Mahabharat, so in the beginning, with all the title sequence, you have these two verses being chanted. You remember that? Yeah, so these two verses have become very popular. So verse 9. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. He who thus knows truly my divine birth and work is no more born after death. He attains me, O Arjuna. So, what Krishna says is, if we understand Krishna's both the divine birth what does divine birth mean? I mean, why use the adjective divine? Could have said, well, Krishna's birth. The very fact that the adjective divine is used shows that it's not a normal birth. And that goes back to what we said before. It may not have really happened. It's just through divine Maya that it seems to have happened. So one who recognizes the divine in Krishna, Tyaktva deham punarjanma, is no more born after death. He attains me. So look at this translation again. He who thus knows truly my divine birth and work is no more born after death. He attains me, O Arjuna. So there are two first person pronouns. My divine birth, and he attains me. Who is this me? What does it mean to attain Krishna? What does it mean to Krishna's divine birth? What does it mean attaining Krishna? Of course, in mythology, we read about, again, it depends. There's so much of mythology. Some followers of Krishna truly believe that there is a realm, a divine realm, and sometimes that is called Goloka. Sometimes Krishna is seen as an incarnation of Vishnu, and so attaining to Krishna would mean going to Vaikuntha, the place of Krishna, place of Vishnu. In some sects which worship Krishna, they see Krishna as even above Vishnu. And so even Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, they all have come from Krishna. So Krishna is the highest Godhead. And so sometimes they then associate that realm with Goloka. And so attaining me would perhaps can also mean going to that Goloka. But that meaning would make sense if we understand here, knows my divine birth and attains me as referring to Krishna. So look at it this way. Now you and I also use the pronoun me, mine, I all the time. I mean, life would be impossible if we did not use that. I mean, just try not using I, me, or mine. It'll be difficult. It'll be awkward. You won't be able to live a normal life without that I, me, and mine. So when we say I, okay, let's do an experiment. Close your eyes and just repeat to yourself I 5 times mentally. Okay. So what comes to your mind when you say I? Who are you referring to? Who is this I? Yeah, so clearly, good. So for instance, I can say, I'm sitting on this chair. So then people, what exactly? It sounds odd, what exactly is sitting? But essentially, it's this body which is on this chair. So when I say, I am sitting on the chair, my I includes this body. Or when I say, I'm happy, I'm miserable, I'm excited, these are all states of the mind. And so my I includes my mind, my I includes my ego. So then, and then of course, we say, I was born, each of us has a date of birth, and so on. So we now know what our I includes. It's this whole package. It's the body, mind, ego, the whole thing put together is our I. Now, when Krishna also is using the term I, several times, it will come as you see in the Gita. He will several times use the word I, me, or mine. As in this verse, he who thus knows truly my divine birth and is no more born after death, he attains to me. So when Krishna uses the word I, or me, or mine, what does Krishna see? We know what we know. We know what we see. We know what we mean by I. What would Krishna mean by I when he said it? And if we say that, well, pretty much the same thing. Krishna also had a body. He had a mind. He had all these wonderful qualities, and he had an ego. Otherwise, why would he say I? So Krishna also then referring to his body, mind, ego, like I'm referring to my body, mind, and ego. If that were the case, then what's the big deal? What's the difference between me and Krishna? So something is different, right? I mean, why would we think he's an incarnation? Why would we think he's divine? Why would we think he's enlightened? And the Vedantic approach to this is that our true nature, our real I, is not the body, mind, ego, and everything. The real I is the Atman. Each of us, not just Krishna, every one of us, our real I is birthless, is immutable, is the Lord of all creatures, the real I. But that's not the I we refer to when we say I. But Krishna, and again, I don't mean to limit it only to Krishna. I mean to all these great manifestations of the divine that have come periodically. Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Ramakrishna, all of them. Whenever they use the word I, they refer to the Atman, to the spirit. And the spirit is birthless. The spirit is immutable. So when Krishna says, I am birthless, we could say, that's a lie. I mean, we know he was born to Devaki and we know his parents' name. No, but he was not telling a lie, because when he said, I am birthless, that I was not referring to one who was born to Devaki and Vasudeva. That I was the spirit. So then, with that insight, and these are Krishna's words, that you come to my being, he attains to me, which really means, therefore, not that I go to some Goloka or some celestial world, but I then attain to that infinite being. In other words, both Krishna is the divine Atman, and you and I are also divine Atman. No difference. But only one difference, and probably a major difference. Krishna knows he is the divine Atman, and we don't. Well, we know it. We are studying the Gita. We have kind of an intellectual understanding. At least as long as we're reading it, we are able to hold the thought for a second. But that's only intellectual. As we go about our day-to-day activity, we don't go about as if we are birthless and deathless. Think about how wonderful life would be if from morning to night, everything that you do with the awareness, I am birthless, I am deathless, I am immutable. There can be no worry, no anxiety, no stress, no fear, because the moment I fear, the moment I am stressed, the moment I am angry or upset, I have forgotten that I am the birthless and deathless one. And that is why Sri Ramakrishna often said that of the people who come to me, he said it's enough for them. He spoke about the disciples who came to him, but he in generally referred to all of us. He said it's enough for them to know who I am, who they are, and how they are related to me. That's the crux of spiritual life. To have some idea about who we are, about our sense of I, to have some idea, it may not be a perfect idea, but even if it's a hazy idea of who I am, some hazy idea about that infinite being or the truth or the supreme one behind this creation, and how I am related to that being. And we just have to keep on purifying our heart through selfless work, through study, through prayer, through worship, through meditation, the more and more our heart gets purified, the more our relationship with God becomes clearer. It can begin with a very distant relationship. God might appear to be far away, some distant, and we don't know really how we are connected with God. Sometimes it might just begin with, well, God is a creator, and God created me, which is good. I mean, that is a relationship there, a creator and a creature. Then a little bit of love grows into our heart. And then the relationship is not such an impersonal one. Oh, God just made me and here I am. It's more than, depending on, someone might see God as my master. I'm God's servant. Or God is my mother or father and I'm a God's child. Sometimes God is my friend. The greater the intimacy grows with the spiritual ideal, the closer the divine comes. Some have seen the divine as their child. Some have seen divine as their mother, and so on. And ultimately, that we are become so close to the divine, the relationship becomes so close, so intimate, that there is nothing to separate the two. And that's why the ultimate is reached in unity. Then we see that the two are not really two, but they are one. There is a saying, there is a story which said that a person was sitting and thinking about his beloved, and then there was a knock at the door. And he asked, "Who is it?" And then the answer said, "It's me." The door was not open. Once again there was a knock. He said, "Who is it?" "It's me." The door was not open. It went on like that for a while. And then when he said, "Who is it?" "It's you." And then the door opened. In other words, our love for God should reach that level when the me completely vanishes. So sometimes we might think that, and that's the kind of a popular idea, that the puja that is done, for instance, it's a very dualistic thing. Clearly, you're doing puja, the divine is on the altar in front of you, you're offering flowers and sandal paste and incense and fruits. Seems very dualistic. You are sitting here and you're doing puja. But no, those who have actually done puja, if you do the puja well, it's not a dualistic practice at all. It remains dualistic as long as you are aware, now I am doing puja. So if all the time with the awareness I am doing the puja and this I is very prominent, then God has already gone into the background. Then it's all about me. Or when you're doing puja, say, I'm doing the puja of God or divine or Krishna or Vishnu or whichever puja you're doing. So there is still the awareness of I. But when you become completely immersed in your puja, then even the thought that I am doing puja, that I completely vanishes. So then it's only the divine who remains in your field of consciousness. So there is only really one. In the path of knowledge, that one is seen from a subjective standpoint. That's the Atman. In the path of devotion, that one is the divine. But it's still one. The I is absent. So both, whether you look at it subjectively or objectively, there is only really one. And so that is how we need to understand this verse. He who thus knows truly my divine birth and work is no more born after death, he attains me, O Arjuna. Because being born after death, but death is a death of the body. Birth is an acquiring of a body. But we are not the body, we are not the mind. So we really have nothing to do with birth and death. And yet the fact that we are afraid of death shows that my I is still attached to the body. You see, when we are fast asleep, when you're not even dreaming, you are not attached to either your body or mind. You have no fear, no anxiety, no fear of death, nothing. Except that in a state of deep sleep, it's an unconscious state. We really didn't do anything to acquire it. It just happened. That's just how it happened naturally. That way it goes away also naturally when you wake up. Now the question is, consciously, can I disidentify myself from the body and mind the way it happens naturally in deep sleep? If I can do that, the problem is solved. Now, disidentify from the body and mind doesn't mean the body and mind is just going to just evaporate and boom, it's gone. No, it's going to be there, except that it then becomes an instrument, and you become one who is using that instrument. And therefore, as I mentioned on earlier occasions, rather than, it's a tall order to immediately begin saying, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. That's the eventual goal. But an intermediate step would be to not feel that the body and mind don't exist. I mean, that would be just silly to say body and mind don't exist. Of course they exist. But to recognize them as instruments. That just as I use my pen, I use my glasses, I use my computer, I use my car, I use my body, I use my mind. This is instruments that you came with already as a gift. You didn't have to buy it with a lifelong guarantee. You can say. So it's already there. And we, of course, add on to these instruments with acquiring a lot of other instruments in life. But these are the instruments that we already have. So I think that's very helpful. That look upon the talents, the abilities, the qualities that you have as instruments. And put these instruments to good use, to the use of dharma. And if you put them to good use, that will purify your heart. And when it purifies your heart, then my own vision will become clear. One of the questions that often gets asked in northern India, especially among the monastic community, so they will ask in Hindi, they'll say, "Drishti saaf hai." It literally means that, are you able to see things clearly? And normally would think, well, as long as I don't have to use glasses and I'm able to see things clearly, we might say, well, I'm able to see things clearly. But that's not the question really. The question is, when are we really able to see things clearly? We can say that the moment I think of my I, and the first thing that comes to mind, I am the Atman. The body, mind, ego, and everything attached to them don't appear as integral parts of my I. Then I've begun to see things clearly. Until I continue to see myself as a human being, I'm not really seeing things clearly from a spiritual standpoint. Spiritually, I'm still blind. That is why Kathopanishad, one of the Upanishads, has this imagery of a blind leading the blind. And that is why we need, the need for guru in spiritual life is we need someone whose eyes have opened, who can then help me open my eyes, who can then help me see things clearly. So clarity of perception means perception of who I am, not looking at the world. We may have a perfect pair of eyes, and yet that person may be spiritually blind. So once our eyesight opens, once we know we are the Atman, then we are no more born after death. There is no death, there is no birth, because birth and death belong to the body. That's the idea. So these are very important verses, 7, 8, and 9. There is a lot to think about. So we have dealt with some of the key points that come. You have any comments, questions about the 3 verses that we saw today?
You made the distinction earlier between humans and avatars. By that rationale, it's only a matter of awareness that separates the two.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
So, but that doesn't mean that when my awareness becomes full, I will become Krishna. So the example is this. Sometimes the example that's given is, for instance, now there is let's say the imagery of Ganesha. The Ganesha, and the Ganesha has since every deity has a vehicle, the Ganesha's vehicle is a mouse, right? Now, and say both the image of Ganesha and the mouse, it's a image made of gold. Now both, the mouse is gold and the Ganesha is gold also. So there is no difference as to their stuff. They both are gold. If you melt them, they will all become gold. You won't be able to distinguish the Ganesha gold from the mouse gold. And yet, the mouse will never become Ganesha. The mouse is always a mouse. Ganesha is always a Ganesha. So what it means is this, that as long as the power gets embodied as Krishna, and the power is embodied in me, the power itself is the same, but the embodiment is different. And so, as far as the consciousness is concerned, the pure consciousness, that the consciousness in Krishna and the consciousness in me are not different at all. They are same. They are one. They are not two different consciousnesses. Consciousness. You never really use consciousness in a plural. You can't. So the consciousness is really one, but as embodied in Krishna. So that's why Krishna says earlier in the chapter to Arjuna, we have been born many times. I know them all. You don't. So Krishna, therefore, the avatar is seen as a master of Maya. So the avatar is through the power of Maya that the avatar takes birth, and it's through the power of Maya that we take birth also. But an avatar is one who controls Maya, and we are those who are controlled by Maya, although the inner stuff is really same. Okay?
Building upon that, so this was causing me some confusion initially, the reference to Maya here, because in our earlier sessions we studied that we have to overcome Maya in order to gain better realization of the divine. But the divine is using Maya to teach us, essentially.
Say that again, divine?
But so Krishna here is making use of the power of Maya in order for us to realize better. So it's a conflicting use of Maya in one sense, but we should understand it as, so as you said, we are being controlled by Maya, but the ultimate goal is to overcome that.
Yeah.
So then my confusion was, how can the divine, who knows everything, use a disguise of Maya, which is only human? But so the concept of avatar basically explains that. Is my understanding correct?
The last part I didn't hear, understand. The concept of avatar.
The concept of avatar, which can basically explain the conflict here. How we understand Maya and how the divine...
Yeah, I mean, you see, the thing is this. It was not that the avatar concept was created and then these avatars started coming. See, it's like this. We see periodically. So it's more observing the facts which cannot be disputed. This is a fact of observation in history, that periodically extraordinary beings have come and they seem so special, so powerful, so different from us ordinary human beings that we could say, well, they are special. And so how do these special beings fit into this whole picture? So it is first the phenomenon was observed, and then a concept came into being. So it is not that the concept existed and now Krishna has to come down. So it is first the things have happened, and then we are now creating the concept. I mean, Krishna himself wouldn't care whether you call him avatar or you don't call him anything. So these concepts are helpful for us to understand what has happened in history, and if history repeats itself, what can happen in foreseeable future. Maya, there's a bit, in the days ahead, we'll have a lot more to talk about it. So very briefly, Maya really means just sleep. It just means losing awareness. It's like, and that's why sometimes even nidra or the sleep is called a kind of Maya. It's like, it's like when I now, let's say I have full consciousness, then I fall asleep. So what happens really? My consciousness has gotten covered by sleep. And then I start dreaming. So I become a creator of my dream because my consciousness got veiled and now I'm asleep. Now sometimes you will see, the only way you can understand this is like sometimes when you are dreaming and you know you are dreaming, as opposed to those who are dreaming and don't know that they are dreaming. So a rather simple way to put this would be that this is the whole cosmic dream. The whole process of creation itself is a big dream. Krishna is in the dream, but Krishna knows that he is dreaming. We don't. We are taking it all to be real. When we know it's a dream, we will wake up, we will be free. That's basically it. And then once you wake up, it really doesn't matter whether you have seen Krishna in your dream or Buddha or whoever. You have just woken up and you found that you were asleep and you have woken up. So the avatar and this divine being helping other people, all this kind of interaction between the divine and the rest can happen only in a state of duality, right? When you wake up, you're all alone. It's like I go to sleep alone and then I start dreaming. In my dream, I meet hundreds of people. Some are extraordinary people. Maybe I meet even Krishna in my dream, and I meet some terrible people in my dream. And Krishna helps me and protects me. I am, let's say, when I fall sick in my dream, and then a doctor comes and helps me, cures me, and I feel all right. I'm very grateful to the doctor. And all kinds of things happen in my dream. And then in the morning, I wake up. So everything has disappeared. My sickness has gone, the doctor has gone, Krishna has gone, everything is gone. And the reality was, I was the one being who was asleep, who was dreaming all this. So that's where it is. So an avatar is a lot to think about. In Shankaracharya's commentary on this, he goes on quite a lot, and then he says, Dehavan iva, jata iva in Sanskrit. Iva means as if. So he uses the word as if. So Krishna, the divine, seems as if to be born. The divine seems as if to take a body. And the as if, because it cannot really happen. If it really happen, then there is going to be this contradiction that which cannot be born is born. Then it wasn't birthless to begin with. And so everything in Vedanta really is as if. Because ultimately, Brahman alone is real. That's the reality. So we will see. We'll have a lot more we'll come to this idea again. Because Krishna knows that it's not something that is going to be absorbed very quickly. And as I said, Arjuna was not the brightest bulb in town. And so luckily, Krishna keeps on repeating it several times, which will be helpful for us also. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. So our subject on the Sunday will be the art of knowing. So we'll see a little bit about how knowledge or jnana is understood in Vedanta. Next Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the Gita. And on Tuesday and Saturday, our Arati and meditation will also continue as usual. On the 3rd, the music is on 3rd or 2nd? 3rd. So on 3rd of May, I'll have the notice up on the notice board soon. We have a special music program here that will be Saturday evening instead of the meditation from 6 to 7:30. A very renowned Hindustani classical music program. And on 4th, instead of the lecture that's been announced, we'll have a visiting Swami from Hollywood. He's a real Swami, he's not Hollywood. So he will be presenting a slideshow on Swami Vivekananda. So that will be on 4th of May. So 3rd May, a music program. 4th May is the special program. But that's 10 days from now. This Sunday, we will have the art of knowing, which I'm not sure is as interesting as a slideshow. So we'll conclude with a prayer now. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being become manifest unto us. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May the Divine bless us all and fill our hearts with infinite grace and love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.